I'm your host, name bin Mohammad Rafi, and here is your YouTube channel, Zamir Universal. Now, finally, that happens what the world was waiting for, and the culprit, the criminal, the mentally retarded, schizophrenic, paranoid person, the one of the dirtiest, the filthiest character in the world, who has been issued and that he should be taken care of, and the delay in issuing warrants for his arrest by the International Court of Justice are on its way. United Nations Security Council, everybody in the world, all the head of states have been pleading with this mentally retarded man. Even 80% of his own people living in there, whose loved ones are hostages for the last 11 months, dying in the caves. This, it's stubborn like a mule, like a donkey, and ugly like a pig. He's started the Third World War. Now, the regional war is converted after destroying completely the Gaza, after making the life of the over 200,000 poor, Gaza people whom he has left no stone unturned to inflict cruelty. Even his idea of the diaper soldiers have thrown the injured people from the top of the roof. First they injured them and then they threw them off. Where is the bloody Red Cross? Where is the conscience of the West? What kind of civilization who is putting? Then the mobile devices, when we were in the training about 30, 40 years ago, the beepers or pagers were used to call us for an emergency, somebody bleeding and dying, and whether we were out in the shopping center or we were out with the children, we had to get back immediately to the hospital tower and find out that what was the emergency and reach there within a matter of minutes to save life. And now look at the mobile devices, look at the mobile, the laptops, look at the walkie-talkies, and look at the bastard. This, you talk about the other people that they are terrorists. I think the biggest terrorist at this swine and his supporters. And his supporter, that he says that you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. The bloody, that sleepy Joe who destroyed America, because the weakest person you are, you cannot make a decision. So thank God that the Democrats spit it on his face and threw him out and got now, Kamala Harris. At least, although she is married to a Jew, at least she will be a normal person to make some decisions and will stop this nonsense. Now, the French President Macron openly phoned this swine, opened this, and said, you are single-handedly responsible for starting the war, the regional war, which is now turning into the Third World War involving Russia, China, whole of Middle East turning up and down, turning all the trade from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, getting the ships on fire. And what's going to happen to you? It's going to pay back through your bloody nose. You destroyed and leveled Gaza. Now Tel Aviv, Haifa, all your cities are going to be leveled. What is the fault of those people who you gathered? This scum of the society you gathered, you brought them, you settled them. And look at the cruelty they've been inflicting. One by one, they will be now slaughtered like animals, because you have withdrawn the forces from West Bank and from the Hamas. Now imagine what's going to happen to you. How on earth are you going to face the Yemeni hypersonic missiles, the Iraqi missiles, and Syrian missiles, then Hezbollah missiles, then the Hamas? Then you will see that the movement from inside you is going to assassinate all 4 or 5 you whose pictures I am going to put on this vlog, so that you can see what they are saying and how proud they are to saying, stop water, stop food, stop electricity. You bloody bastard son of a bitch, are you proud of this? You did this and you tried to poison and you killed 6,000 Germans. by putting poison in their water and you sort of declare them as heroes. That's what you are, one of the filthiest, the dirtiest nation on earth. You have no right to be, for existence. And this is why you keep saying Israel has the right to exist. You don't. You are not civilized. You are an animal. You're not. Even I think you are lower than the animals. Then that's why you are doing it, and now you face the ban. But unfortunately, what you are doing is you are going to have many innocent Jews, which are much, much, much nicer than the you who are womenizers, drunkards, the propagators of LGBT, the sodomy, and the rape to the detainees, and you strip the women and their daughters and their teenagers, kids, right in front of them to insult and intimidate them. And you think you can survive by doing this thing? Now you foresee for yourself that your time has come. One day the time of everybody who inflicts cruelty on other comes and is killed like a dog.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आज इज़राइल के लिए जो दिन है वो कोई आम दिन नहीं है, वो तारीख में तबाहकुन दिन के तौर पर याद रखा जाएगा और न जाने कितने इससे खतरनाक दिन आने वाले हैं कि इज़राइल इस दिन को भूल जाएगा। इस सूरत हाल में आज इमेजिन कर लें, इज़राइल को पैरालाइज कर दिया गया है। जो सबसे ज्यादा तबाहकुन पूछ रही है कि तुम बताओ भाई, तुमने मुल्क के अंदर इतना पैसा लिया, फौज को बजट दिया, एयरफोर्स को बजट दिया, तुम मुल्क बचा रहे हो हमारा, उन्होंने मुल्क आपका उधेड़ के रख दिया है। आप अंदाजा लगाना चाहते हैं तो आप दो चीजों से अंदाजा लगाएं। सबसे पहले इस तस्वीर को देखिए, ये बज़ाहिर आपको एक तस्वीर बिल्कुल ठीक नजर आ रही, लोग घरों में मौजूद हैं, गाड़ियां हैं। अब अगली तस्वीर देखिए जरा, अब उसके बाद जरा हाल देखिए, तबाही का वॉल्यूम आप चेक करें। आप घर में बैठे हैं, इतवार का दिन है और आपका घर आप समेत सारा तबाह हो गया, गाड़ियां आपकी तबाह हो गई, सब कुछ आपका तबाह हो गया। और आपका वजीर आजम आता है और आकर कहता है, जी मेरे अजीज हमवतनों स्टाइल, कि जी मुल्क के ऊपर आफत आन पड़ी है, अब जंग में कूदना पड़ेगा, कुर्बानी देने के लिए तैयार रहे, बर्बादी होने वाली, इन्होंने हमारा मुल्क तबाह कर दिया, पैरालाइज कर दिया, ये कर दिया, वो कर दिया। लोग उससे पूछते हैं कि क्या हुआ, आप जानना चाहते हैं तबाही कितनी है? आप जरा ये तस्वीर देखिए, ये इस्राएल का डिफेंस मिनिस्टर है, ये 3 दिन पहले किस जगह पर खड़ा है? रमात डेविड एयरबेस। और इसके बाद ये वहां पर जाकर कहता है कि जी आप बेफिक्र हो जाएं, हम कमाल तरीके की तबाही करने वाले हैं इनकी, और ये कर एयरफोर्स को कहता है मारो जाके इनको, छोड़े इस बात को। उससे पहले नेतन्याहू गया इस एयरबेस के ऊपर, वहां पर गया, वहां पर जहाजों का मुआयना लिया, वहां पर F-16 और पता नहीं कौन कौन से जहाज वहां पर थे, हेलीकॉप्टर से पूरा ऑपरेशन का जायजा लिया। वहां जाके कहता है कि देखो हिजबुल्लाह के सामने तुम्हारी एयरबेस है, उड़ा दो इसको, मेरा ऑर्डर है, सब कुछ तबाह दो। वहां पर जहाजों के आगे खड़े होकर कहता है कौम को, आप बेफिक्र रहें, मैं जिस बेस के ऊपर खड़ा हूं, हम ये उड़ाने वाले हैं इनको। और आप जानते हैं आज क्या हुआ है? आज हिजबुल्लाह ने एयरबेस ही उड़ा दी है, सारी की सारी एयरबेस तबाह कर दी है। यानी 3 दिन पहले इनका डिफेंस मिनिस्टर जिस एयरबेस पर जाकर हिजबुल्लाह को धमकियां दे रहा था, लेबनान को धमकियां दे रहा था, चंद दिन पहले इनका प्राइम मिनिस्टर नेतन्याहू जिस बेस के ऊपर जाकर धमकियां दे रहा था कि हम लेबनान को सिफारसी से मिटाने जा रहे हैं, मैं यहां से ऑर्डर कर रहा हूं एयरबेस को, एयरफोर्स को कह रहा हूं कि इसी एयरबेस से उड़े और उड़कर जाकर तबाह करके वो एयरबेस ही उन्होंने उड़ा दी। आप देखिए जरा ये मनाजर, ये हिजबुल्लाह ने बताया था पहले ही कि इनका ड्रोन उड़ा था इस बेस के ऊपर से, तो ड्रोन जब उड़ा था तो ये डिटेक्ट नहीं कर पाए, तो उन्होंने उसी वक्त पैगाम दे दिया था कि भाई जिस दिन तुमने रेड लाइन क्रॉस की, हम तुम्हारी हर चीज क्रॉस कर देंगे, फिर खत्म हो जाएगी। यानी ये बात आपको एक चीज बड़ी जबरदस्त नजर आएगी। उन्होंने कहा था, यानी यमन ने इनको धमकी देकर कहा था कि इस जंग में कोई रूल्स नहीं होंगे, कोई असूल नहीं होंगे। इसराइल ने सारे इंटरनेशनल रूल्स तोड़ दिए, हम भी तोड़ देंगे। आज सूरत हाल ये है कि लोग जो इस बेस के करीब या नॉर्दर्न साइड पर वो घरों में थे, वो कहते हैं कि हमारे बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आज इजराइल के लिए जो दिन है वो कोई आम दिन नहीं है, वो तारीख में तबाहकुन दिन के तौर पर याद रखा जाएगा और न जाने कितने इससे खतरनाक दिन आने वाले हैं कि इजराइल इस दिन को भूल जाएगा। इस सूरत हाल में आज इमेजिन कर लें, इजराइल को पैरालाइज कर दिया गया है। जो सबसे ज्यादा तबाहकुन हुई है, घर तबाह हो गए और उसके बाद क्या हुआ जी? वो जी असल में हुआ ये है कि जी लोग जख्मी हुए हैं। जिस तरह के ऊपर से आप सोचें एक मिसाइल इनकी मिलिट्री बेस पर जाकर लगा, सारी बेस उड़ा दी, उसमें जहाज भी हैं, जहाज भी तबाह हो गए होंगे। जाहिर सी बात है इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें। अब ये तो नहीं है कि आपने जहाजों को उठा दिया, आपने वो एयरबेस रखी इसलिए कि भाई आपका वजीर आजम और वजीर दिफा वहां पर जाकर कह रहे मारो इनको, और आपने उड़ा दिए। सो इस सारी सूरत हाल के अंदर इजराइल का आज सही मायनों में तबाही का वो दिन है। उन्होंने हमले किए और इस दफा जो हमले किए इनको पता चल गया है कि इनके साथ हुआ क्या है। सबसे बढ़कर बात यह है कि डायरेक्ट हिट हुआ है, यानी उसमें कई लोग इस वक्त अस्पतालों में।
Coming through. One, Hamas and Israel disagree on the number of hostages to be released from the enclave. It's unclear what number is included in the bridge proposal or how many are still alive. Both also disagree over Israel's presence in both the Philadelphia corridor on the Egypt-Gaza border and in a main thoroughway that leads to northern Gaza. Israel has said it wants to maintain its position in both places to ensure Hamas cannot smuggle goods into Gaza. The eventuality of a deal not coming through has already been indicated as severe. Already Israel and Hezbollah strikes, counter-strikes are getting more intense by the day. A direct confrontation between Israel and Tehran simmers and threatens to boil over. A fresh threat from Iran on Wednesday spelled out its eagerness to inflict maximum damage.
The time is decided by us. The waiting period for our response might be longer. For now, the Zionists should wait in limbo, in fear of Iran or the resistance front, or the resistant front's possible attack and its dimensions. They must wait for our well-calculated and precise blows at the right time.
Previous efforts to reach a ceasefire deal in spring and again in May this year have broken down. Israel and Hamas have layered on new conditions that the other side was unwilling to discuss or accept. Behind the scenes, officials are scrambling to find a way to reach a deal. Hope is fading, and it's fading fast.
I think too many in their camp want to see a military success and a military victory and are concerned and actually outright fear that a ceasefire that doesn't achieve their military goals could put them at future risk. At least that's what their thinking is. And so those are actually working against any kind of a ceasefire, even though many in Israel actually want it, and certainly those family members of the hostages.
Carlo Davis, the war is unrelenting. Now the IDF has issued fresh evacuations on Deir al-Bala. Some critics are warning that Israel persists in strangling civilians in narrow places. And with that being said, Jordan has also warned of dangerous deterioration in occupied West Bank. What's your brief assessment of all these latest developments?
It's very concerning to me because, I mean, you're talking, we're now getting amazingly close to the 1 year mark of this war, and there's no evidence that it's going to end anytime soon. In fact, there's more evidence that it's going to expand. I mean, the ideal would be that we get to a ceasefire and then get into some kind of negotiated settlement that would end the war, and I'm certainly 100% in support of that. But the problem is that the evidence on the ground and the things you can physically see make it look more like Israel is preparing to expand the war into Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon, and certainly there are many. And it was actually in a Newsweek article just late last week where some of the Israeli officials openly said that war with Iran was inevitable, quote, and that they wanted the United States to join in with that. So there's elements within Israel that are at cross purposes, some wanting peace, some wanting...
It's their 2035 Gaza plan to rebuild Gaza into an Israeli version of Dubai. How are Israel and the United States going to steal the oil and all of the natural gas off of Gaza and to enrich the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard? Well, look no further than the brand new Gaza 2035 plan, which Netanyahu unveiled this weekend. Great timing, too. He's like, hey, we're about to destroy Rafah, totally eliminate about 1 million people. But here's a 9-page PDF for our plan. This is what we plan to do in Gaza, which is perfect. It's like we want to build our own Dubai in Gaza. Perfect timing. So take a look at this. This is the new Israel 2035 plan, for Gaza. Look how beautiful that will look once they rebuild it and kick all of those, all those dirty Palestinians out of there. And they'll build new rail infrastructure, new port infrastructure. It'd be easy access to all of that oil. And they'll be able to get all of this into the Middle East economy. So a place so devoid of Palestinians, of course, as they describe it. They describe it as a future where Gaza is de-radicalized from Islamism, transformed into a trade hub of prosperity and innovation, and integrated into the Middle East economy. So a place totally devoid of Palestinians, of course. According to the Jerusalem Post, the documents lay out 3 steps to return Gaza to self-governance and economic growth. The first step would see 12 months of humanitarian.
Motorola, which has launched a $1 billion lawsuit against the state of Israel, is now finished. Motorola will never work again. No one with the remotest sense would ever buy a Motorola product ever again. And yet they, it seems, are entirely innocent of this crime. A company in Hungary, a shell company in Hungary, bought the license to construct and distribute Motorola products. They paid by BACS transfer through a bank in the Middle East, the country as yet unspecified. If it is Israel, of course, it's QED. But if it is another country with relations with Israel, that will be a very serious development indeed. The shell company in Hungary then assembled thousands of electronic products from car radios to pagers and mobile phones and placed 20 grams of explosive material in thousands upon thousands of them. Then they sold them in Lebanon. The havoc is widespread. The war will be more widespread still. In parenthesis, there was only one hospital in Lebanon not using the 2024 Motorola devices. Only one. That was the American University of Beirut Hospital, all of whose pagers were replaced by new ones just last week. Make of that what you will. Make of the American overflight of Lebanon in the day before the attack, this mass terrorist outrage was launched. Make of that what you will. However they were triggered, it's clear that the batch of thousands of devices, from mobile phones to solar panels, were sold from Hungary. Motorola will launch a $1 billion lawsuit against Israel. Good luck getting paid for that. The company will, of course, go into liquidation. But the import for the electronics business in general across the world cannot be underestimated. The truth is, no electronic device originating in any Western country can now be trusted.
और इनको ये बात समझ नहीं आ पा रही कि हमारे साथ इस वक्त हो क्या रहा है। स्कूल, यूनिवर्सिटीज, ये सारे हाइफा और एरियाज में इस वक्त बंद हो गए हैं और आप अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं कि इनके मेयर की चीखें निकल रही हैं। यानी इस वक्त सबसे बड़ा मसला हुआ है कि लेबनान जो हमले कर रहा है वो इनकी सिक्योरिटी साइट्स, इकोनॉमिक साइट्स और फैसिलिटीज पर हमला कर रहा है। यानी आप ये देखें कि हाइफा, किरियात, ये वाले एरियाज, और ये पहली दफा हुआ है 2006 के बाद उन जगहों पर तबाही की जा रही है जहां पर इन्होंने बनाया सब कुछ। आपको पता है कि असल कहानी क्या है? ये जरा आप देखिए तो सही, ये तस्वीर आपको, ये तस्वीर मिलती जुलती नजर आएंगी, बड़े तरक्की याफ्ता। ये असल में नेतन्याहू का ग्रैंड प्लान है। ये इनका गजा विजन 2024 को चुराकर विजन 2035 है। अब इसमें अगर आप गौर से देखेंगे तो इन्होंने ये सारा जो नक्शा है, ये तस्वीर जो आप देख रहे हैं, ये गजा की है। ये इन्होंने बताया है कि हम गजा को फ्यूचरिस्टिक सिटी बना रहे हैं, उसकी ऑयल गैस चोरी करके यहाँ पर ऐसा सिस्टम होगा कि पूरी दुनिया भूल जाएगी न्यूम सिटी को या लॉस एंजलिस को या अमेरिका या दुनिया की तरक्की याफ्ता मुल्कों को हम ऐसा शहर आबाद करेंगे, दुनिया भूल जाएगी हर मुल्क को, हम इतनी तरक्की बनाएंगे। यहाँ पर किसका लैंड है? ये गजा के लोगों का लैंड है कि जी हमने उनको वापस नहीं आने देना। खंडर इसलिए किया था। और बेशरम देखिए कैसे हैं, यानी जब तबाही की है तभी मनाजिर भी जारी कर दिए कि यहाँ पर फ्री ट्रेड जोन होगा या फलाना होगा, ये होगा। ये सारे नक्शे मैप पूरा मास्टर प्लान उन्होंने रिवील किया है। अब आप एक बात बताइए, ये तो इनके प्लान है, कुदरत के भी तो कुछ अपने प्लान है। भाई अपना पहले किरियात शमूना बचा लें, अपनी पहले रमाद एयरबेस तो बचा लें जहां से हमला करने के लिए जाना है। सो इस सारी सूरत हाल के अंदर आपके प्लान यहाँ पर धरे के धरे रह गए हैं और आप सोचें कि इस वक्त उधेड़ कर रखा हुआ है इनको। और सबसे बड़ी बात है कि इजराइल ने अब हमला करना, उनके सबर का पैमाना हो गया लबरेज। और सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि जो रिहायशी हैं इस वक्त नॉर्दर्न की साइड से, वो सारे के सारे छोड़कर जा रहे हैं, सारे के सारे शहर भी खाली कर रहे हैं। और गालिबन इस वक्त हाइफा शहर खाली होने के लिए जा रहा है।
Ambedue sono contro la vita, sia quello che butta via i migranti, sia quello che uccide i bambini. Nella morale politica, in genere si dice che non votare è brutto, non è buono, si deve votare e si deve scegliere il male minore. Chi è il male minore? Quella signora o quel signore? Non so, ognuno in coscienza pensi e faccia questo.
זה בסדר לירוק על נוצרים.
האם זה בסדר? מצד מה? האם מבחינת התורה?
לך, כאילו.
אז
מה
ככה.
אתה אומר?
אם הם עובדי עבודה זרה, אז אנחנו צריכים למוס בהם ולשקט אותם ולרמוס אותם, ובעיקרון גם להרוג אותם, כי הרי גוי חייב בשבע מצוות בני נוח, ואם הוא לא מקיים את זה צריך להרוג אותו. אבל...
אתה תהרוג מישהו?
אם הייתי יכול, הייתי מאוד שמח לעשות את זה, אבל אין לנו בית דין, אז אנחנו לא יכולים לעשות את זה.
אוקיי.
אבל האם לירוק עליהם, אז ככה, זה יכול לגרום גם לעבירה שכולם חילול השם, ואם אין לזה תועלת, אז אין עניין לעשות את זה, אבל אם היה לזה תועלת כלשהי, שזה היה מפחית את העבודה הזרה בעולם, ודאי שהיה בזה עניין גדול.
אז זה שמישהו מאמין בישו ונצרות וזה, זה...
אז צריך להרוג אותו.
בינתיים, אוקיי, אבל אין בית דין.
אז לא עושים את זה.
אז זה בסדר לירוק על מישהו כזה?
אמרתי, אם זה גורם תועלת, אז כן, אם לא, אז לא.
תסביר תועלת.
להסביר תועלת, אם הוא יפסיק לעבוד בגלל זה עבודה זרה, אם הוא יתרחק מהעניין.
אבל זה אמונה של מישהו אחר.
זה אמונה שמישהו מאמין בה, צריך להרוג אותו.
מי שמאמין שהאלוהים שלי הוא חלק מאיש, אז צריך להרוג אותו. מי שמזלזל באלוהים שלי, אז אני אהרוג אותו.
אז זה לא, אבל זה תפקיד שלכם, להרוג או לרעוק, זה לא התפקיד של אלוקים?
לא, השם אומר לנו מה לעשות.
הוא אומר, זה כתוב, להרוג? איפה? איפה כתוב?
היהדות תפקידה בעולם זה לעשות טוב, לגרום שהעולם יהיה נקי.
כן.
אז כל בן אדם שיאמין באיזה בן זונה אחד.
אבל איפה זה כתוב? אבל איפה זה כתוב?
איפה זה כתוב? בגמרא. אתה רוצה להביא גמרא? אנחנו יכולים להביא גמרא ולראות.
אבל הגמרא זה כתוב על ידי אנשים, לא על ידי...
על ידי אנשים שהקדוש ברוך הוא שלח חכמים שכתוב בתורה של להקשיב להם.
The enemy of Yishmael, that Yishmael represents, is an enemy that cannot be defeated by conventional methods. The danger of Yishmael is a much more subtle danger. There's no way to stop it, meaning there is no logical way of stopping people who are willing to die for their cause. What, they're threatened with death? Bring it on, gesundheit. That's what I want.
In a video circulating on social media, a Jewish student asks a rabbi a question. The student appears confused about why God grants the prayers of Muslims, whom they consider to follow a misguided religion. In general, Jews believe that Muslims worship the same God as they do, but they regard Islam as a misguided faith.
We have the same God as the Arabs. We believe in the same God, one God. So it's a paradox. See, the Christians believe in the Trinity, whatever that's supposed to mean, but it's a part of it is their God, who's the JC we call her, but that's not our belief at all. We're not allowed to believe in anything like that.
Let's return to the original story. The young man's confusion is evident from his question. He begins by recounting his experience in yeshiva, where he learned that Arabs also pray to God for their success, which sometimes comes to fruition. He added, "Do we have the right to stand before God and ask him to ignore the prayers of others? Or should we see it as a prayer competition in the eyes of God?" Hearing such a question, the rabbi said that it is a very complex question and requires deep understanding. He acknowledged the difficulty in understanding this phenomenon and recognized that the conflict between spiritual and physical forces has been a long-standing debate in Jewish history.
My question is about the war. The Gemara says that when the Listim pray to Hashem for success, they pray good, He grants them success. He helps them to steal. And I think the Sephardi Nusach is different than the Ashkenazi Nusach, but we learned Hashem Shomei Tefilat Kol Peh.
Yeah, the Sephardi, yeah.
And moreover, I remember when I was in yeshiva, you told us that the Arabim are such a difficult opponent because they do have certain schusim, and they have a certain kasher with Hashem. They have Mila, they have some version of kashrut, they have sniot. Maybe some people could say they're better with sniot than we are. And so my question is something that I've been struggling with, standing before Hashem and tefillah, feeling some sense of confusion and discouragement about that. And even though it hasn't been for me, I can imagine someone might feel something as negative as even betrayal, that to think that the Arabim are, they're praying to Hashem for success, to hurt us. And we know that they did that. And we know that they had the success and that Hashem answered their prayers. So how do we deal with that confusion with tefillah if we think about that? And moreover, do we even have the right to stand before Hashem and say to Hashem, please Hashem, listen to our prayers, ignore them? We know that they're saying, Hashem, listen to our prayers, ignore them.
Yeah.
And then even more than that, is it hashkafically correct to even think of this as like a schusim arms race, or like a tefillah, like Hashem's counting a cheshbon of tefillot and schusim between us and between them?
Yep, it's a very, very difficult issue, and this is a concept that I admit has given me much confusion and uncertainty over the years. And that is the notion that prayer has a power, prayer has an efficacy, even when it is uttered by a rasha and even when it's for immoral purposes. This is the kayach of prayer if it is belev shalem, if it is truly sincere. There is something called dark spiritual energy. Tefillah is a spiritual energy, and even when it comes out of darkness, it has a certain power.
Furthermore, the rabbi elaborated on the strengths of the descendants of Ishmael. He acknowledged that the greatest difficulty for the Jews was in confronting the people of Ishmael. Their power lies not only in their physical strength, but also in the spiritual dimension they possess. As descendants of Ishmael, Muslims have a strong spiritual heritage, including traditions of prayer and the benefits of the covenant of circumcision. This spiritual aspect sets them apart from other enemies of the Jews, as they can harness their spiritual strength to achieve their goals, even if it means sacrificing their lives. For this reason, the rabbi asserted that to face an enemy like the descendants of Ishmael, there is a need to develop strategies based on greater spiritual strength. Something important to mention here. In Islamic teachings, praying for harm or evil upon others is forbidden. This is supported by various hadith narrations and statements from Islamic scholars. In the hadith it is mentioned, "Truly the oppressed prays for evil upon the oppressor until justice is served, but then what remains is the surplus of the oppressor's wrongdoing over the oppressed on the day of judgment." All right, let's return to the main discussion.
And indeed, this is very, very clearly the case. If you think about this, the enemy of Yishmael, that Yishmael represents, is an enemy that cannot be defeated by conventional methods. There's no way to stop it, meaning there is no logical way of stopping people who are willing to die for their cause. What, they're threatened with death? Bring it on, gesundheit hate. That's what I want. You see, the Nazis, I have to say, at a minimum, if you can say something good about the Nazis, is that they were cowards. So when a Nazi thought he would be killed, he starts negotiating when they saw that the end was near. And Hitler was enough of a coward that he took his own life in a quick way rather than facing the consequences. So Nazis were cowards. So cowards can be defeated by overwhelming military force. Mutual assured destruction only works when you either have cowards or at least normal people, people who don't want to die. But when you have people who don't care if they die, then how are you going to stop them? There's nothing you can do. So really, the statement of Rav Chaim Vital that Golus Yishmael is impossible to defeat by conventional military means, is even true on a simple political way. There's no way. You do your ishtadlus, but there's no particular way that you can guarantee anything. So the dilemma is we need spiritual ways of defeating them. And yet we do find that prayer is such a miraculous power in the universe.
Was this a Suez moment in Washington yesterday? Did the British poodle ask its American master to allow it to do something in Ukraine, in Russia, that the American government said no to? Or is it all kabuki theater?
Well, it's not kabuki theater. This is actually, we came very close to all dying yesterday. I just want to drive this point home. Annie Jacobson has written a book on nuclear war. It's a fiction book, but it's based upon interviews she's had with nuclear war planners. I've read the book. It's very accurate. 72 minutes is what it will take from start to finish to end of the world. 72 minutes. And we almost ended the world yesterday because had Tony Blinken and the British defense minister gone to Kiev and do what they were planning on doing, which is giving a green light to the Ukrainian forces to use British and American-made long-range strike weapons against targets inside Russia. Had we done that, the Russians would have launched a retaliation that would have triggered a global-ending nuclear war. This is a statement of fact. How do we know this? Because the Russians told us this. We had a trifecta of public statements made by the Russians, starting with Vladimir Putin, who said this will be an act of war. We had the Russian ambassador to the United Nations tell the Security Council in session that if this happens, it is a declaration of war. And then we had Anatoly Antonov, the Russian ambassador, say on Friday, understand that our retaliation will not just be limited to Ukraine and NATO. We will hit the United States as well. This woke up the Biden administration. There was a back channel, too, that not too many people talk about. It's believed to be through the intelligence services. And the Russians were apparently very explicit as to what would be done. So explicit that the Biden administration pulled the plug on something it wanted to do. This wasn't just about the British poodle trying to pull a quick one. We were part of this, too. We, together with the British and NATO, believed that Russia was bluffing, that Russia would never follow through, that this was just another red line that was going to be crossed. This time, the Russian response apparently woke up the Biden administration, especially the back channel response, which was very, very blunt and very explicit as to what would happen. I will say, if you live in London, you are very lucky today that the United States pulled the plug, because you wouldn't be here today. If you live in other places in Europe, if you live near Ramstein Air Base, if you live near Brussels, you are very fortunate today, because you'd be dead.
But that's because most of these concepts, most of the so-called Enlightenment concepts, you ripped off from the Muslims. But you didn't take the religion, you didn't take the religion that provides the necessary framework for any of these concepts to actually work and make sense. It's like you ripped pages out of a book, but you didn't take the book. So the story is disorderly, it's unorganized, it's not coherent, it's all out of order. John Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, Thomas Jefferson, all of them took inspiration from Islamic civilization. Because of course they did. Where else are you going to look for inspiration? It was the most sophisticated, the most advanced, the most well-managed, well-organized, the most moral, and the most ethical civilization in human history. Of course you're going to look to them. I mean, you couldn't even look to your beloved Greek philosophers if it hadn't been for us. You left them in the dustbin of history. And whatever you have read from them, and whatever you read from them now, it has first passed through Muslim understanding and interpretation before it ever reached you. What you call Modernity is just a deformed, maladapted, inferior version of the civilization that we had centuries before the Enlightenment. The difference being that ours worked. Ours was coherent. Ours could be understood and practiced. But you see, you only took concepts that would allow you to remain the same, to not actually mature or develop or civilize, but which would allow you to pretend that you did, because individual liberty sounds much more sophisticated than shameless. Personal freedom sounds better than amorality or irresponsibility or social irrelevance. The free market sounds much more noble than the feudal system. And as long as you use these elevated, pretty sounding words, you can stay just as oppressive and savage and brutal as you always were and call it modernity. And as long as you have some level of material prosperity, you can maintain the charade to some extent. But just let that prosperity deteriorate, just like it is doing now. And you'll see how little you've actually changed, how little you've actually matured or civilized over the past 2,000 years. Watch, the cost of living goes up, the quality of life goes down, and your women immediately prostitute themselves. And your men immediately start burning and looting, just like the old days. And just like the old days, your feudal lords and masters are going to turn the guns on you. And then you'll know what your so-called civilization really is, what your societies really believe in. And it isn't liberalism and it isn't modernity, I can tell you that. It isn't democracy and it isn't freedom. It's predation and subjugation and exploitation and brute force. It's do as you're told. It's a hierarchy of cruelty where everyone uses and abuses whoever is lower than them on the ladder, rich and poor, white and black, native and immigrant, men and women. And it's going to be a harsh awakening for everyone who thought that they lived in an advanced civilization or who thought that the Muslims were the ones.
यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार ज़रूर